First on our news at 7, Fire Festival founder Billy McFarland labeled a fugitive in the Bahamas after he unveiled plans for a new venture on Exuma. And questions that need answers. The Prime Minister dodges the collapse of FTX when questioned by reporters. Disappointment lingers after the sale of the Grand Lucayan Resort falls through. A former Lucayan Holdings board member speaks out. And then in our news at 7:30, don't become a victim of crime this holiday season. Police sharing safety tips and advice. Our news live at 7 starts now. Welcome to our news live at 7, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Candino Knowles. Well, the organizer and founder of the failed and highly controversial Fire Festival branded a fugitive after reports started surfacing that the festival was coming back. Well, tonight the Ministry of Tourism is saying they gave Billy McFarland no approval for the festival. Berthany McDermott gets us started.
The Davis administration making it crystal clear it will not endorse or approve any event in the Bahamas associated with Fire Festival founder Billy McFarland. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism Chester Cooper made the assertion today after it was revealed that McFarland plans to return to the Bahamas for another event called PYRT, a treasure hunt. On TikTok, he posted this video with clips that appear to be in the Bahamas.
First bottle is officially up for grabs. The treasure hunt starts now.
Really? Yeah. Oh my God, we did it!
Next Friday, you guys are going to the Bahamas for the weekend?
No.
When we visited pyrt.com, the GPS coordinates for Black Point Exuma are displayed, but according to the DPM, no application has been made for any event promoted by McFarland. The statement adds he is considered a fugitive with several pending complaints made against him with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. But from the TikTok promotional video, it appears they may have already made a trip to the Bahamas.
So we in the Bahamas. I found a bottle, honestly. We went out to the city 3 o'clock in the morning. Basically found a spot. Next morning we went, grabbed the bottle. Now we here, enjoying our life.
The website requires a phone number and says, join the crew. McFarland was jailed for 6 years after a failed concert event never took place. It was promoted on social media by various influencers. However, when they arrived in Great Exuma in April 2017, they were met with chaos as nothing promised was fulfilled. Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Meanwhile, police in a joint operation with Securities Commission are now investigating FTX following the company's collapse. In the past few days, more details have emerged pointing to mismanagement of client funds and possible breaches of regulations. Today, Prime Minister Philip Davis dodging reporters' questions. Police Commissioner Clayton Fernando telling a local daily that police had yet to meet with Sam Bankman-Fried, the former CEO. FTX filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States on Friday. All of his assets were frozen by the Securities Commission and put into liquidation. Bankman-Fried lost his $16 billion fortune in less than a week and resigned from the company. When pressed on the matter today, the Prime Minister said this.
PM, were you surprised about the FTX implosion?
And you'll talk about it another time.
Are you concerned about the image, the country's image?
Well, the bankruptcy and freezing of FTX's assets still sending shockwaves throughout the cryptocurrency community. Our Marlena Leonard has public reaction to the ongoing drama.
The collapse of FTX, the third largest cryptocurrency exchange, has been making headlines around the world. But here in the Bahamas, many have a closer eye on the story, fearing that even if they didn't personally invest in the company, its ties to the Bahamas could have consequences. Here's what the public had to say.
For the country to go delve into crypto when not much places really doing that, to me, it's just wild.
Some of them called for more to be revealed. Although the Securities Commission of the Bahamas announced on Thursday that assets of FTX Digital Markets Limited and related parties had been frozen, when it comes to local authorities, there is yet to be any official comment from the Prime Minister or Minister of Economic Affairs, Michael Halkitis.
It makes us look bad. We could regulate. I don't know what's happening with the regulators. What they doing about it?
But not everyone is worried.
I think we just like to sometimes blow things out of proportion, you know. I never invested it.
No, I think we just like everything else. I think sometimes when you don't know the background of things, sometimes you kind of puff. But I think everything is like
Now in the height, something else will come up, and then we're going to move on.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
On to another story we've been following. Disappointing is how one former Lucayan Renewal Holdings board member is describing the collapse of the sale of Grand Lucayan Resort. The news coming in a statement last week. Attorney and former board member of Lucayan Renewal Holdings, Kerry Leonard, says, like many Grand Bahamians, he is unhappy with the way things turned out.
We have to get our act together. And as I say, we need to take a different approach. One is we've got to get the airport fixed. I don't see why this particular government can't throw $30 or $40 million to fix this airport right away. They're working hard on the airlift, but the airlift isn't going to work if we don't have an airport and we don't have hotel rooms.
Now stay tuned for more on the former board member's comments during Our News at 7:30 with Italia Hall. Meanwhile, a mega resort expected to invest some $200 million in Grand Bahama, the Six Senses Hotel, launches next month on that island with a completion date of early 2026. Hundreds of jobs are also expected to accompany the resort. Founder and president of Blue Action Lab, Rupert Hayward, applauding the project and says the partners involved are world-class.
Weller Development Partners and Pegasus Capital Advisors are right at the top of their game in development and in financing these types of projects. They're both what I would call triple bottom line businesses. So when they invest and when they develop, they focus on the community around them and they focus on creating sustainable development models. And obviously they focus on profitability as well. But, I think for me and I think for Grand Bahamians, this is the catalyst for change.
And for more on that multi-million-dollar project in Grand Bahama, stay tuned to Our News at 7:30. We've got lots more to get to in a moment, but first we turn things over to meteorologist Greg Thompson, who is standing by in the Weather Center with a look at temperatures across the islands. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Gindino, and a happy Monday evening, everybody. A beautiful evening on the outside right now. Temperatures very comfortable, 82 with a few clouds. Your winds are out of the northeast at 9 miles per hour, and your feels-like temperature at 83.
Three suspects arrested for that murder on Exuma last Thursday. Police telling Our News that the man was shot to death in the quiet Rollville community around 11 o'clock that night. There's been no word on when those suspects will be formally charged. And police taking nearly half a dozen guns off the streets in days. The 5 handguns and 35 rounds of ammunition confiscated in 4 separate incidents by officers working across several divisions. 14 people in all were arrested. And police were busy over the weekend investigating yet another murder. It's an all too common scene as the murder rates stretches into triple digits. And while there is a tendency to almost become immune, a top cop is insisting even one murder is too many. Head of the Royal Bahamas Police Force's Criminal Investigations Department, Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson, making the comments on the sidelines of a weekend murder.
We are always concerned, and we, again, every week we meet and we come up with strategies and tweak our strategies in trying to deal with these matters, and we continue to ask the public to please be careful, be aware of their surroundings, and assist the police as much as possible.
The murder count hit the triple digits in late September. There were 87 murders recorded in the first 9 months last year. The opposition is calling for an extension to the special economic recovery zone set up for the Dorian recovery period. Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, Senator Kwesi Thompson, says many residents are still recovering from the storm and Hurricane Nicole, yet another setback.
Now that Hurricane Nicole has passed, that makes our call that much more urgent. And there should be no excuse for the government not to extend the SERS order. I know persons in my constituency, businesses in my constituency, and businesses throughout the island of Grand Bahama, and also Abaco, which we observed. They experienced significant flooding, significant storm surge, significant property damage. And it was a significant setback to the repairs.
Member of Parliament Iram Lewis also weighing in on the SIRS order extension. He says the question for government is whether Grand Bahama and Abaco have sufficiently recovered from Dorian.
We should do all that we can to ensure that those islands are empowered. Residents of those islands are empowered. The small home repair program is extremely important. We have not completed that yet, and I just want to reiterate what was already said. It is important for us to ensure that the small home repair program resumes and it comes to completion as soon as possible.
When our news comes back from the break, we turn our spotlight to stories making headlines across the world as there are some political changes in Haiti. Plus, how much longer will students and teachers wear masks in schools? We may not know the answer yet, but there are some small steps you can take to keep schools safe. And say cheese, the world's first 16-megapixel photograph makes its debut on this day in the year 2000. We've got the details when our news returns. This is our news. Welcome back. We turn our attention now to stories making headlines across the world. A court in Iran issuing a death sentence for taking part in the recent countrywide protests. State media reporting a revolutionary court in Tehran found the defendant guilty for setting fire to a government facility. He was charged as an enmity against God. The Norway-based human rights group warning authorities might be planning hasty executions with at least 20 people facing charges punishable by death.
At the same time, we will adopt another sanctions package to send a clear message to those who think they can suppress, intimidate, and kill their own people without consequences. They cannot do that. This has consequences, and the world, Europe, are watching.
Critics of former U.S. President Donald Trump are blaming him for the poor showing of Republicans in the midterm elections last week, while others are blaming Senate Leader Mitch McConnell. Meanwhile, the White House making its strongest indication yet that Joe Biden will run for re-election. While Democrats took control of the Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives remains uncalled nearly 1 week after the midterms. Republicans are still favored to win the lower chamber of Congress, which would severely hamper President Biden's plans for the remainder of his term in office. The UK falling silent Sunday as a 2-minute silence was held to honor the servicemen and women who died in past conflicts. King Charles II leading the ceremony and laid a wreath at the cenotaph in front of other royals, senior politicians, and Royal British Legion veterans. Meanwhile, President Biden accepting the resignation of U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Christopher Magnus. It comes days after U.S. media said Magnus was asked to resign or be fired in tensions within Biden's administration over a record number of migrant crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border. Magnus was told to resign or be fired less than a year after he was confirmed as the Biden administration's choice to lead the agency. His removal is part of a larger shakeup expected at Homeland Security as it struggles to manage migrants coming from various countries. And in regional news, Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry dismissing his Justice Minister, Interior Minister, and its government commissioner in a fresh round of political upheaval. Henry did not say why they were removed. His spokesman could not be reached immediately for comment. Henry assumes the post of Interior Minister while still serving as Prime Minister. And also from Haiti tonight, fuel supplies resuming under heavy security after police broke a two-month-long gang blockade that had the economy without petrol or diesel, sparking a humanitarian crisis. Armed police escorted trucks loaded with petrol, previously blocked by barricades to prevent fuel distribution. Haiti's National Police said Friday it took back control of the main fuel terminal.
Today is a good day for all of us because we were in a hole and now we're getting out. The whole population felt the effect of the fuel shortage because it is an essential producer.
While most of the adult population is abandoning masks, medical facilities and schools are still requiring masks. The return to normalcy for most of us leaves some parents pushing to remove the mandates for kids. Yet for others, it's a personal choice. Whether your mask is on or off, health officials like General Pediatrician Dr. Sherelle Lockhart reminding us to do our parts to keep everyone safe, and that includes staying home if you feel sick.
Wash your hands, cover your coughs, stay home if you are sick. Don't let the kids go to school with fever. If they're having fever that you need to give medication for, keep them at home. Don't send them to school because unfortunately it's going to go around very quickly in the school setting.
Still to come on our news, today in history, find out interesting facts about the day that was November 14th and how the king is celebrating his birthday. Plus, Greg is back with your extended weather forecast. And then in our news at 7:30, it's beginning to feel and sound like Christmas with the launch of the Salvation Army's kettle season. We'll tell you all about it when our news continues. Welcome back to our news. It's time now to turn our spotlight on events that shaped the day that was. Take a look. On November 14th, 1948, Prince Charles, now King Charles III, was born. The king is the eldest child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. King Charles ascended the British throne in September following his mother's untimely passing, mourned across the globe. Then in 1969, Apollo 12 was launched, carrying a crew of Charles Conrad Jr., Richard F. Gordon Jr., and Alan L. Bean. 5 days later, the mission made the second landing on the moon. In 2000, the world's first 16-megapixel photograph, the highest resolution digital image possible, appears at Las Vegas Computer Trade Show. 2 years later, in 2002, chosen to succeed Richard Gephardt as leader of the Democratic Party in the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi of California became the first woman to be named leader of either party in either House of Congress. 2003 saw the world's first drivable fuel cell vehicle making its first appearance in China. And just 5 years later, in 2008, world leaders arriving in Washington for the G20 summit to resolve the world's worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Well, that does it for us in News at 7. For all of today's top stories, remember you can visit ournews.bs, and also you can share your favorite stories right from the Our News Bahamas Facebook page. Joining us now is our Italia Hall, who has got the latest headlines. Italia?
Yes, Candace. FTX story causing quite a stir internationally. I know you've been following this.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this develop from Monday, Tuesday, where we were made aware of the fact that you had $6 billion or billion in withdrawals from the FTX platform, and then it was by Friday we were learning that the company had gone bankrupt. By that point, we started, doing our own research, and then discovered that the Securities Commission was launching its own investigation jointly with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And we've been seeing those in the international community talk about this in particular as it relates to regulation. We've seen the U.S. Securities Commissioner, the U.S. Securities Commission Chair discussing the issue of regulation and how an industry like this, unregulated, this kind of thing you continue to see happen, right? One of the things that stood out to me was the CEO of Custodia Bank, Caitlin Long. She mentioned, you know, the grizzly veterans. They had seen this happen so many times in the commercial sector that this wasn't new for them. So this is certainly a story that we are continuing to follow, yeah?
Thanks so much. As well as more reaction to the bill ratifying sale on Red Bahamas. Live on our news at 7:30, disappointing. A former Lakayan Holdings board member describes the status of the resort's sale, and no government endorsement of the next venture by Fire Festival founder Billy McFarland. Plus, the latest page of the FTX saga unfolds as the PM dodges questions on the fallout. Our news live at 7:30 starts in a moment.